The gunshot echoed across the valley as Grace Norton clutched her trembling hands to her chest, feeling the world crumble beneath her feet. The town of Riverdale, Colorado, had always been her home, but on this crisp autumn morning in 1875, it became her prison and then her exile. "You ain't welcome here no more," Sheriff Dawson declared, his weathered face contorted with disgust as he addressed the gathered townsfolk. "This woman has brought shame upon herself and this God-fearing community." Grace stood before them, 22 years old and 3 months with child, her blue calico dress unable to hide her condition any longer. The whispers had turned to open condemnation when her secret became visible. Without a husband, without explanation, she became Riverdale's fallen woman. "Please," she begged, her voice barely audible above the murmurs of the crowd. "This isn't what you think." But no one listened. Not even her father, who stood stone-faced among the judgmental crowd, his Methodist minister's collar stark white against his black coat. His silence cut deeper than any words could have. "You have until sundown," Sheriff Dawson continued. "Take what you can carry and leave. Don't come back." The crowd dispersed, leaving Grace alone in the town square, autumn leaves swirling around her feet. She returned to her family home for the last time, finding the door already locked against her. A small bundle of her belongings sat on the porch, her mother's final act of mercy, before turning her back on her only daughter. As the sun began its descent, Grace climbed aboard the westbound stagecoach with nothing but a carpetbag of possessions and the child growing inside her. She had no destination, only the desperate need to flee from the shame and find somewhere anywhere that might offer shelter to a woman in her condition. The coach lurched forward, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. Through the window, she watched Riverdale disappear, the church steeple where her father had preached forgiveness every Sunday the last thing to fade from view. "Where you headed, miss?" asked an elderly woman seated across from her. Grace dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I don't rightly know." "Well, we're bound for Silver Creek. It's a mining town, rough around the edges, but they don't ask too many questions there." Grace nodded, one hand unconsciously moving to her belly. She didn't tell the woman that she carried not just her unborn child, but a secret that would follow her like a shadow, a secret about a man with promises as empty as the miles now stretching between her and home. The stagecoach continued westward as dusk painted the Colorado mountains in shades of purple and gold. Grace Norton had been banished, branded with shame, but as the miles passed beneath the wheels, a quiet determination took root within her. She would find a way to survive, for herself and for her child. 3 days later, the stagecoach rolled into Silver Creek under a blanket of dust. The mining town sprawled before her, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a main street that had more saloons than churches. Men in dirty clothes moved between establishments, their laughter rough and unfamiliar to Grace's ears. "Last stop, Silver Creek," called the driver as the coach came to a halt. Grace stepped down onto the dirt street, clutching her carpetbag tightly. The thin mountain air caught in her lungs, and she swayed slightly, exhaustion and morning sickness conspiring against her. "You all right there, miss?" asked a woman's voice. Grace turned to see a stout woman in her 50s, her face lined but kind. She wore a practical dress and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to hard work. "Yes, thank you. Just a bit tired from the journey. You look like you could use a hot meal and a place to rest. I'm Martha Holloway. I run the boarding house just up the street." Grace hesitated, counting the few coins in her purse. "I don't know if I can afford. We can discuss that later," Martha interrupted. "Come along now." The boarding house was simple but clean, a far cry from the comfortable home Grace had left behind. Martha showed her to a small room on the second floor. "Dinner's at 6, she said, before pausing at the door. Her eyes took in Grace's condition with a knowing glance. "No one here will pry into your business, but if you need work, I could use help with the cooking and cleaning." Grace's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I'm a hard worker." "I believe you are. Rest now, we'll talk more later." Over the next few weeks, Grace established a routine. She rose early to help prepare breakfast for the boarders, mostly minors and the occasional traveler. She cleaned rooms, washed linens, and learned to stretch pennies further than she'd thought possible. But she couldn't hide her growing condition, and soon whispers followed her when she ventured into town for supplies. Silver Creek might not have been as openly judgmental as Riverdale, but unwed mothers were viewed with suspicion everywhere. One evening in late November, as Grace was returning from the general store with a basket of supplies, she heard footsteps behind her. The street was mostly empty, the early winter darkness having driven most folks indoors. "Well, what do we have here?" slurred a voice. Grace quickened her pace, but the man caught up to her easily. His breath reeked of whiskey as he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Heard you're in a family way with no husband to speak of," he said, leering at her. "That makes you fair game in my book." "Please let me pass," Grace said firmly, trying to hide her fear. "Now don't be like that, sweetheart. A woman in your position can't be choosy." Before Grace could respond, a new voice cut through the darkness. "The lady asked you to let her pass." The drunk turned to face the newcomer, and Grace saw a tall man step out of the shadows. Even in the dim light, she could make out his lean, muscular frame and the distinctive silhouette of a cowboy hat. "Mind your own business, stranger," the drunk spat. "The safety of a lady is every decent man's business," the cowboy replied calmly. "Now step aside." Something in his tone, a quiet authority that promised consequences, made the drunk reconsider. With a final glare at Grace, he staggered away, muttering curses. Grace exhaled shakily. "Thank you, sir." The man stepped closer, and Grace could now see his features' strong jawline partially hidden by a short beard, eyes that seemed to assess everything in a glance, and a face weathered by sun and wind. He wasn't much older than her, perhaps 26 or 27, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of experiences beyond his years. "Name's Adam Landon," he said, tipping his hat. "May I escort you to your destination, Miss Grace Norton? I'm staying at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. It's not far. All the same, I'd feel better seeing you there safely." They walked side by side, Grace stealing glances at her rescuer. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, a blue shirt under a leather vest, and boots that had seen many miles. "You're new to Silver Creek," Grace observed, breaking the silence. "Just rode in yesterday. I'm a horse trader heading to Fort Collins, but my mare threw a shoe. Blacksmith's fixing her up tomorrow." "I see. Well, we're grateful for the business at the boarding house." Adam smiled just slightly. "Are you staying there long-term, Miss Norton?" Grace unconsciously placed a hand on her belly. "For now, until—" She trailed off, but Adam nodded in understanding. They had reached the boarding house, and Grace paused at the steps. "Thank you again, Mr. Landon." "Adam, please." "Thank you, Adam." She turned to go inside, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Norton, Silver Creek's a rough place. Best be careful." Grace nodded and went inside, her heart beating a little faster than it should have. At dinner that night, Grace was surprised to see Adam seated at the communal table. Martha had placed him directly across from her, and Grace suspected the older woman's matchmaking instincts were at work. "Mr. Landon tells me he'll be staying a few days while his horse recuperates," Martha announced. "He's quite knowledgeable about horse breeding. Fascinating conversation." Adam caught Grace's eye, a hint of amusement playing at the corner of his mouth. "Mrs. Holloway is being kind. I simply know good horseflesh when I see it." The conversation flowed easily as the boarders' 3 minors, a clerk from the assayer's office, and now Adam discussed the latest news. Grace mostly listened, serving food and clearing plates, but she found herself drawn to Adam's quiet confidence and the respect with which he treated everyone at the table. Later, as Grace was washing dishes in the kitchen, Adam appeared with his plate. "Thought you might appreciate an extra pair of hands," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "That's kind of you, but unnecessary," Grace replied, flustered by his proximity. "My mother taught me never to let a lady clean up alone." He picked up a towel and began drying the dishes she'd washed. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Adam spoke again. "How long have you been in Silver Creek?" "About a month now." "And before that," Grace hesitated. "A small town east of here, not worth mentioning." Adam nodded, respecting her reluctance. "Well, Silver Creek seems lucky to have you." Grace nearly dropped the plate she was washing. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with genuine kindness rather than pity or judgment. "Most wouldn't agree with that assessment," she said quietly. Adam set down the towel and turned to face her. "Miss Norton, I've learned that most people are rarely good judges of character." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Grace felt truly seen for the first time in months. The moment was broken by Martha bustling into the kitchen. "Grace, you should rest. I'll finish up here." "I'm fine, Mrs. Holloway." "Nonsense. In your condition, you need your rest." Martha shooed her away from the sink. "Mr. Landon can help me finish up if he's so inclined." Adam smiled. "Happy to, madam." Grace reluctantly dried her hands. "Good night, then." "Thank you both." As she climbed the stairs to her small room, Grace found herself thinking about Adam Landon and wondering how long he might stay in Silver Creek. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Grace helped serve breakfast to the boarders, including Adam, who thanked her with a warm smile that stayed with her as she went about her morning chores. By mid-morning, she was sweeping the front porch when a commotion down the street caught her attention. A group of men had gathered outside the saloon, and their angry voices carried on the winter air. "We don't need your kind here," one shouted. Grace set aside her broom and walked to the edge of the porch. She could see the men surrounding someone, their postures threatening. "I have as much right to be here as any man," came a response, a woman's voice, defiant despite being outnumbered. Grace moved closer, drawn by concern. The crowd parted slightly, and she saw a young woman standing her ground. She was dressed in men's clothes, pants, boots, and a heavy coat with dark hair cut short beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "You're nothing but trouble, Rosie," one man sneered. "Coming in here, taking jobs that belong to men." "I'm a better shot than half of you," Rosie retorted. "The Silver Star hired me fair and square." The situation was escalating, with several men moving closer to Rosie, hands hovering near their gun belts. Grace felt her heart racing, remembering all too well what it felt like to be surrounded by hostile faces. Before she could think better of it, Grace walked toward the confrontation. "Excuse me," she called. "I need help carrying some supplies back to the boarding house." All eyes turned to her, including Rosie's surprised ones. "Mrs. Holloway sent me to find someone strong enough to move a heavy trunk," Grace continued, looking directly at Rosie. "Would you be willing to help? She's offering a hot meal in exchange." For a moment, no one moved. Then Rosie nodded. "Sure thing, miss." The men grumbled but stepped back, unwilling to continue their harassment with Grace as a witness. Rosie followed Grace back toward the boarding house, both women walking quickly. "Thank you," Rosie said when they were out of earshot. "Though there isn't really a trunk, is there?" Grace shook her head. No, but Mrs. Holloway always has extra food and you look like you could use an ally. Rosie studied her with keen eyes. That's mighty kind, especially considering. She glanced at Grace's midsection and Grace tensed, expecting judgment. Instead, Rosie smiled. Seems we're both outsiders here. I'm Rosie Chen. My father was Chinese, my mother Mexican. Neither side much wanted me, so I've been making my own way. Grace Norton, she replied, relief washing over her. And you're right about that meal. Come inside. Martha was surprised but welcoming when Grace explained the situation. She set out bread, cheese, and cold meat for Rosie, who ate with the efficiency of someone accustomed to not knowing when her next meal might come. You work for the Silver Star Mining Company? Martha asked. Rosie nodded. Just got hired as a guard. I can shoot straighter than most men I've met. And that's what's got the town riled up, Martha concluded. Men don't like it when a woman does their job better, Rosie agreed. Especially a woman who looks like me. Grace sat across from her, intrigued by this bold woman so different from herself. How did you learn to shoot? My father taught me before he died. Said a girl like me would need to protect herself in this world. Rosie's expression softened briefly. He was right about that. The front door opened and Adam walked in, stopping short when he saw Rosie. Miss Chen, he said, nodding. Landon, Rosie replied. Didn't expect to see you here. Grace looked between them. You two know each other, we've crossed paths, Adam said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. Miss Chen has a reputation in certain circles. All good, I hope, Rosie said with a hint of challenge. Adam's mouth quirked. Depends on who you ask. I heard you outdrew Billy Parsons in Durango last spring. He called me a cheating half-breed, Rosie shrugged. I just showed him I didn't need to cheat. Martha looked concerned. You didn't kill him, I hope? Just winged him, Rosie assured her. Enough to teach him some manners. Grace was watching Adam, who seemed neither shocked nor disapproving of Rosie's story. Instead, he regarded her with what appeared to be respect. The world's changing, he said. Some men are just slow to notice. Rosie raised her eyebrows, then nodded as if coming to a decision. You're all right, Landon, she turned to Grace. Thanks for the meal and the rescue. I owe you one. You don't owe me anything, Grace replied. That's not how I operate. Rosie stood, adjusting her gun belt. I pay my debts. She nodded to Martha and Adam, then headed for the door. See you around, Grace Norton. After she left, Martha shook her head. That's a woman with stories to tell. And enemies to watch for, Adam added. Grace, it was kind what you did, but be careful. Rosie Chen has a complicated past. Don't we all? Grace replied softly. Adam held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. Fair point. The next few days brought heavy snow to Silver Creek, keeping most people indoors. Grace found herself spending more time with Adam, who seemed in no hurry to leave despite his horse being ready. They would talk in the evenings after dinner, Adam helping with dishes or simply keeping her company as she darned stockings by the fire. She learned he was from Texas originally, had fought briefly for the Confederacy when he was just 18, and had spent the years since moving between ranches and towns, never settling long in one place. He spoke little of his family, only that his parents had died in a cholera outbreak when he was 16, leaving him to fend for himself. What about you? He asked one evening as they sat in the boarding house parlor. You never speak of your family. Grace's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending. They're back east. We don't speak anymore. Because of the baby, she nodded, eyes fixed on her sewing. My father is a minister. When he found out about my condition, he said I had brought shame to the family name. That seems a harsh judgment from a man of God. He believes in a wrathful God, not a merciful one. Grace swallowed hard. The entire town turned against me. I was banished, told never to return. Adam was quiet for a moment, and the father of your child, Grace's hands trembled. He's not in the picture. I see. Something in his tone made her look up. Instead of disgust or pity, she saw anger in his eyes, not directed at her, but at those who had wronged her. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said simply. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "Most men wouldn't be sitting here talking to a woman in my situation." "Most men are fools," Adam replied. "Whatever circumstances led to your condition, I see a brave woman making her way against considerable odds. That deserves respect, not condemnation." Grace felt tears threatening and blinked rapidly. "You're a surprising man, Adam Landon," he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I try to be." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Martha, who had been dozing in a rocking chair, startled awake. "Who could that be in this weather?" she muttered, rising to answer. When she opened the door, Rosie stood there, snow covering her hat and shoulders, her face pale beneath her tan. "Sorry to intrude," she said, her voice strained, "but I need help." Adam was on his feet immediately. "What's happened?" "Got shot," Rosie said, opening her coat to reveal a bloody shirt. "Nothing vital, but I need someone to dig the bullet out." "Get her in here," Martha ordered, all business. "Grace, fetch my medical kit from the kitchen pantry." They brought Rosie to the kitchen, where the light was better. Adam helped her remove her coat and shirt, revealing a bullet wound in her upper left arm. Grace returned with Martha's surprisingly well-stocked medical kit. "Who shot you?" Adam asked as Martha cleaned the wound. Rosie winced. "Some hired guns working for the Blackwell Mining Company. They don't like that I'm working for their competition." "This is going to hurt," Martha warned, holding up a pair of tweezers. "Grace, give her something to bite on." Grace handed Rosie a folded leather strap. As Martha began probing for the bullet, Rosie gripped the edge of the table with her good hand, her knuckles white. "You're doing just fine," Grace said softly, placing a comforting hand on Rosie's shoulder. Martha extracted the bullet with practiced efficiency, then cleaned and bandaged the wound. "You're lucky. The bullet went clean through muscle, missed the bone entirely." "Not my first bullet," Rosie said, her voice raspy. "You can't go back out in this weather," Grace said. "Stay here tonight." Rosie shook her head. "I've put you all in danger just by coming here." "They followed me for a while before I lost them in the snow." "All the more reason to stay," Adam insisted. "You're in no condition to defend yourself if they find you." Martha nodded. "I'll make up the spare room. Grace, fetch one of your nightgowns for Miss Chen." Rosie looked like she wanted to argue but was too exhausted to do so. "Just for tonight," she conceded. Later, with Rosie settled in the spare room, Grace found Adam checking the locks on all the doors and windows. "You really think those men might come here?" she asked. "Better safe than sorry," he replied. "Blackwell Mining doesn't have a reputation for giving up easily." The name struck Grace like a physical blow. "Blackwell," she repeated, her voice suddenly faint. Adam turned to her, concern etched on his face. "You know the name." Grace steadied herself against the wall. I've heard of them." Adam studied her face. "There's more to it than that." Before she could respond, a wave of dizziness washed over her. Adam was at her side immediately, supporting her elbow. "You need to rest," he said. "Whatever it is, it can wait until morning." Grace allowed him to guide her to the staircase. "You'll keep watch." "I'll be right here," he promised. Morning came with clearing skies and a fresh blanket of snow covering Silver Creek. Grace awoke early, her sleep having been troubled by dreams of her past. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Adam dozing in a chair by the front door, a rifle across his lap. He stirred as she approached, instantly alert. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. You stayed there all night, she observed, touched by his vigilance. Told you I would. He stood, stretching his tall frame. No sign of trouble. They prepared breakfast together, moving around the kitchen in comfortable tandem. As they worked, Grace felt Adam's eyes on her occasionally, questions unasked hovering between them. Rosie joined them shortly, looking pale but steady. "Smells good," she said, easing into a chair. "Thanks for patching me up." Martha appeared next, and soon the four of them were seated around the kitchen table, plates steaming before them. The other boarders had already left for work, giving them privacy. "So," Rosie said between bites, "what's your connection to Blackwell Mining, Grace?" Grace set down her fork, stomach churning. "Is it that obvious?" You went white as a sheet when Adam mentioned the name last night. Martha looked concerned. "Grace, what is this about?" Grace took a deep breath. "Harrison Blackwell is the father of my child." The silence that followed was deafening. Adam's face had gone completely still, while Martha looked shocked. "The Harrison Blackwell?" Martha finally asked. "The mining magnate," Grace nodded. "He came to Riverdale last spring, supposedly looking at property for a new mining operation. He attended my father's church, charmed everyone, especially me." She stared down at her hands. "He courted me properly at first, gifts, chaperoned walks. My father approved Harrison was wealthy, respected. But then he said he loved me, that we would be married. I believed him." "And then you found yourself with child," Rosie concluded softly. "Yes. When I told him, he denied everything, said I was trying to trap him, that any number of men could be responsible." Grace's voice broke. "He left town the next day. When my condition became known, everyone believed his version. Even my own parents." Adam's hand had tightened around his coffee cup. "That's why they banished you. A minister's daughter carrying the child of a man who denied her," Grace confirmed. "The shame was too much for them to bear." "And now Blackwell's hired guns are in Silver Creek," Rosie said. "That can't be coincidence." Adam leaned forward. "Did he know where you were going when you left Riverdale?" "No, I didn't know myself, but—" Grace hesitated. 2 weeks ago I wrote to him, I thought, foolishly, that if he knew I was truly carrying his child, he might acknowledge us." "You told him you were in Silver Creek?" Adam asked, his voice gentle despite the urgency of the question. Grace nodded. "I gave this address. I haven't received a reply." Adam and Rosie exchanged glances. "Those men weren't just after me," Rosie said quietly. "They were looking for you too." "That doesn't make sense," Grace protested. "Why would he send men after me? He wants nothing to do with this child." "Unless," Adam said slowly, "he wants to ensure there's no child to cause him problems in the future." The implication hung heavy in the air. Martha gasped, and Grace's hands went instinctively to her belly. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't. He couldn't possibly." "Men like Blackwell protect their interests at all costs," Adam said grimly. "An illegitimate child could damage his reputation, threaten future business dealings." "Or inheritance," Rosie added. "Does he have other children, a wife?" "He's a widower," Grace said. "His wife died years ago. I don't know about children." "We need to get you out of Silver Creek," Adam decided. "Today." "Where would I go?" Grace asked, panic rising in her throat. "I have a friend with a ranch near Fort Collins," Adam replied. "You'll be safe there until we figure things out." "We?" Grace looked at him questioningly. "I'm not leaving you to face this alone," Adam said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Neither am I," Rosie declared. "Blackwell's men already want me dead. Might as well give them a good reason." Martha stood. "I'll pack food for the journey. Grace, gather only what you absolutely need. Light traveling is essential in this snow." As the others sprang into action, Grace sat stunned by how quickly her life was changing yet again. Just when she'd found a semblance of stability, she was being forced to flee once more. Adam knelt beside her chair, his face level with hers. "I know this is overwhelming," he said softly. "But I promise you, Grace, I will keep you and your child safe." Something in his voice, absolute conviction, steadied her. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. Their eyes held for a long moment before Martha bustled back into the kitchen. "No time for dawdling, Grace. Upstairs with you. Pack now." Within an hour they were ready. Adam had hired a closed sleigh from the livery stable, paying extra for the owner's discretion. Rosie, insisting she was well enough to travel, would ride alongside as lookout, her injured arm bandaged beneath her coat. Martha hugged Grace tightly. "God go with you, child, right when you're settled." "Thank you for everything," Grace whispered, tears threatening. Adam helped her into the sleigh, tucking warm buffalo robes around her. He climbed in beside her, taking the reins as Rosie mounted her horse. "Ready?" he asked. Grace took one last look at the boarding house that had been her refuge. "Ready." The sleigh pulled away, runners cutting smooth tracks through the fresh snow. They passed through Silver Creek quickly, avoiding the main street. As the town receded behind them, Grace felt a curious mixture of fear and hope. "How far is it to your friend's ranch?" she asked. 2 days in this weather," Adam replied. "We'll stop at a way station tonight." They traveled in silence for some time, the only sounds the creak of the sleigh and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. Rosie rode ahead, occasionally circling back to report the trail was clear. As morning gave way to afternoon, Grace studied Adam's profile. "You never answered my question," she said finally. "Why are you helping me? You could have left Silver Creek days ago." Adam was quiet for so long that Grace thought he might not answer. Then he said, "When I was 18, fighting a war I barely understood, I saw men do terrible things. Violence, cruelty. After the war, I swore I'd never stand by while someone vulnerable was being wronged." He glanced at her. "And maybe I see something of myself in you. Someone who's been judged unfairly, cast out for circumstances not entirely of their making." "What do you mean?" Adam's jaw tightened. "The war changed me. When I returned home, people looked at me differently, like I was dangerous, damaged, even family friends. It's not the same as what you're facing, but I know what it feels like when a community turns its back on you." Grace digested this. "And Rosie, why is she risking her life for me?" "You'd have to ask her that," Adam said with a slight smile. "But I suspect it's because you treated her like a person when others saw only her differences." They continued through the afternoon, the mountain landscape stunning in its winter beauty. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the food Martha had packed. Rosie joined them, stamping her feet against the cold. "No sign of pursuit, but we should keep moving." "How's your arm?" Grace asked. "Stiff but usable. I've had worse." Rosie accepted a piece of bread and cheese. "So what's the plan when we reach this ranch?" Adam took a drink from his canteen. "My friend Daniel will give Grace sanctuary while we deal with Blackwell." "Deal with him how?" Grace asked, alarmed. "Nothing violent," Adam assured her, "but he needs to understand you're not alone anymore. That there are people willing to stand up for you and your child." Rosie snorted. "Men like Blackwell only understand one language: power. We need leverage." "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Adam said. "For now, our priority is getting Grace to safety." They packed up and continued their journey. As the winter sun began its early descent, Adam pointed to smoke rising in the distance. "The way station. We'll spend the night there." The way station was a sturdy log building that served as a stopover for stagecoaches and travelers. The proprietor, a gruff man named Jenkins, looked suspiciously at their unusual party but was mollified by Adam's generous payment. "1 room's all I got," he said. 2 beds. "That'll do," Adam replied, "and we'd appreciate discretion about our presence here." Jenkins pocketed the money. "Ain't seen nobody." The room was small but clean, with a fire already burning in the hearth. Grace sat on one of the beds, suddenly overcome with exhaustion. "You should rest," Adam told her. "I'll keep watch for a while, then Rosie." "I'm not sleepy yet," Grace protested, though her body betrayed her with a yawn. Rosie chuckled, checking the load in her revolver. "Sleep while you can, Grace. Tomorrow will be another long day." Adam took a position by the window where he could see the approach to the way station. "I'll wake you if anything happens." Despite her protests, Grace found herself lying down, the events of the day catching up with her. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard Rosie and Adam speaking quietly. "You care for her," Rosie observed. "She deserves better than what's happened to her," Adam replied. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." A pause. "It doesn't matter what I feel. She's been through enough without me complicating things. Sometimes complications are worth it. Get some rest, Rosie." Grace fell asleep pondering Adam's words, a warm feeling spreading through her chest despite the uncertainty of their situation. She woke suddenly in the darkest hours of the night. The fire had burned low, casting the room in shadows. Rosie was by the window now, Adam's tall form stretched out on the other bed. "Everything all right?" Grace whispered. Rosie nodded. "All quiet, go back to sleep." But something had woken her, some instinct pulling her from slumber. Grace sat up, listening intently. The way station was silent except for Adam's deep, even breathing. Then she heard the faint creak of a floorboard outside their door. Rosie had heard it too. She moved silently to Adam's side, placing a hand over his mouth as she shook him awake. His eyes opened instantly, alert. Rosie put a finger to her lips, then pointed to the door. Adam nodded, reaching for his gun. "Grace," he whispered, barely audible, "get behind the bed. Stay low." Heart pounding, Grace slid to the floor and crouched behind the bed farthest from the door. Adam positioned himself on one side of the door, Rosie on the other, both with weapons drawn. The handle turned slowly, silently. Adam and Rosie exchanged a glance. When the door began to swing open, Adam moved with startling speed, grabbing the intruder and hauling him inside. Rosie closed the door quickly behind him, her gun pressed to the man's temple. "Make a sound and it's your last," she warned. The man, young, maybe 20, looked terrified. "Please don't shoot," he whispered. "Who sent you?" Adam demanded, keeping his voice low. "Mr. Blackwell," the young man admitted. "But I ain't here to hurt nobody. I swear it." "Then what are you doing sneaking into our room in the middle of the night?" Rosie asked skeptically. "I was just supposed to confirm the lady was here," he said, eyes darting to where Grace was now standing. "Mr. Blackwell said to bring back word if I found her." "How many of you are there?" Adam pressed. "Just me, I swear. I'm not even a real gunman, I'm a clerk for the company." Mr. Blackwell said it was a delicate family matter. Grace stepped forward. "What exactly did Harrison tell you about me?" The young man looked confused. "Just that you were his late brother's widow in a delicate condition, and that the family was concerned for your welfare. Said you might be confused, that you needed to be brought home safely." Grace exchanged stunned looks with Adam and Rosie. "That's a lie. I never met his brother, let alone married him." "Then why?" The young man's face cleared with sudden understanding. Oh, I see. "Yes, you're being used to track down an inconvenient truth," Rosie said bluntly. Adam studied the clerk. "What's your name, son?" "Thomas Miller." "Well, Thomas, you have a choice to make. You can return to Blackwell with false information, or you can help us protect an innocent woman and her unborn child from a powerful man who wants them silenced." Thomas looked stricken. "He wouldn't really. I mean, he's a respected businessman." Respected men do terrible things when their reputations are at stake, Adam said quietly. Grace approached Thomas. I'm carrying Harrison Blackwell's child. He seduced me with promises of marriage, then abandoned me when I told him about the baby. Now he sent men after me not to bring me home, but to eliminate the evidence of his indiscretion. Thomas looked into her eyes for a long moment, then slumped in defeat. What do you want me to do? Return to Blackwell, Adam instructed. Tell him you tracked us to the way station, but we left heading west toward Nevada, not north to Fort Collins. And then what? Then you decide what kind of man you want to be, Rosie said. One who helps powerful men hurt the innocent, or one who stands against such things. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll send him west, but then I'm done with Blackwell mining. I didn't sign on for this kind of work. A wise decision, Adam said, relaxing slightly. We'll leave at first light. You should go before you're missed. After Thomas had gone, Grace sank onto the bed, trembling. He's really trying to find me, too, to stop me from having this child. Adam knelt before her, taking her hands in his. We won't let that happen, I promise you. We should move now, Rosie suggested. Just in case young Thomas isn't as convinced as he seemed. Adam nodded. Pack up. We'll head out the back way. Within minutes, they were in the sleigh again, Rosie leading the way through the pre-dawn darkness. They took a less traveled path, adding miles to their journey but decreasing the chance of pursuit. As the sky lightened, Grace found herself studying Adam's face. The strong jaw, now covered in several days' worth of beard. The lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. The way his mouth set in determination as he guided the horses through difficult terrain. Thank you, she said suddenly. He glanced at her. For what? For believing me, for helping me. Most men wouldn't. I'm not most men, he replied simply. No, she agreed softly. You're not. They traveled all day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat. By nightfall, they had reached the foothills outside Fort Collins. Adam pointed to lights twinkling in the distance. Daniel's ranch is just beyond that ridge. We'll be there in an hour. True to his word, they soon approached a sprawling ranch house, lamplight glowing warmly in the windows. As they drew near, a man emerged onto the porch, rifle in hand. Who goes there? He called. It's Adam Landon, Adam replied. And friends. The man lowered his rifle. Adam, what the devil are you doing here at this hour? They pulled up to the house, and Adam helped Grace down from the sleigh. Daniel, we need your help. This is Grace Norton and Rosie Chen. They're in trouble. Daniel Carter was a barrel-chested man in his 40s with a kind face and shrewd eyes. He took in their exhausted appearance and nodded. Any friend of Adam's is welcome here. Come inside before you freeze. Daniel's wife, Sarah, was equally welcoming, quickly providing hot food and arranging rooms for them. Grace found herself in a comfortable bedroom with a feather bed and warm quilts luxury after their journey. Sarah, a motherly woman with graying hair, helped her settle in. Adam tells me you're expecting, she said gently. How far along? Almost 4 months, Grace replied. Well, you're safe here. Rest now and we'll talk more in the morning. Left alone, Grace sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by relief and fatigue. They had made it to safety, at least for now. But what came next? How long could she hide from Harrison Blackwell? And what of her growing feelings for Adam, feelings that seemed impossibly complicated given her circumstances? With these questions swirling in her mind, she finally surrendered to exhaustion, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. Morning brought the smell of coffee and bacon. Grace, dressed in the clean clothes Sarah had provided, and made her way downstairs. The ranch house was larger than it had appeared in the darkness, with comfortable furnishings and signs of a well-established home. In the dining room, she found Adam, Rosie, and their hosts seated around a large table laden with breakfast foods. "There she is," Daniel said warmly. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," Grace admitted, taking the empty chair beside Adam. As they ate, Adam explained their situation to Daniel and Sarah, who listened with increasing concern. "Blackwell has a lot of influence in these parts," Daniel said when Adam had finished, "but he's not above the law. The law isn't always enough protection against men like him," Rosie pointed out, "especially for women in Grace's position." Sarah reached across the table to squeeze Grace's hand. "You can stay here as long as needed. We have plenty of room, and it would be nice to have another woman around the place." "That's very kind," Grace said, touched by their generosity, "but I can't impose indefinitely, and I can't live my life running from Harrison." Adam studied her. "What are you suggesting?" "I need to confront him," Grace said firmly. "Not alone, of course, but he needs to acknowledge this child and provide support. It's his responsibility." "That's dangerous," Adam cautioned. "Blackwell has already shown he's willing to go to extremes." "Which is precisely why we need to force his hand," Rosie said, warming to Grace's idea. "Make it more dangerous for him to harm Grace than to acknowledge her." Daniel leaned forward. "Blackwell is coming to Fort Collins next week for the Territorial Business Council meeting. He always stays at the Grand Hotel." Adam looked thoughtful. "A public confrontation would make it difficult for him to deny Grace or threaten her. But it would also expose Grace to public scrutiny and potential shame," Sarah pointed out. "Are you prepared for that, dear?" Grace straightened her shoulders. "I've already been shamed, banished, and hunted. What more can they do to me? At least this way my child might have a future." Adam's eyes met hers, filled with admiration. "Then we'll help you face him." Over the next few days they formulated a plan. Grace would confront Harrison at the hotel during a public reception for the business council. Adam and Rosie would be nearby to ensure her safety, while Daniel would use his connections in town to gather witnesses, respectable citizens whose presence would make it difficult for Harrison to dismiss Grace or threaten her. The days of waiting were strangely peaceful. Grace helped Sarah with household tasks, rested, and spent long hours talking with Adam. They would walk the snow-covered grounds of the ranch in the afternoons, bundled against the cold. "Tell me about your home in Texas," Grace asked one day as they stood looking out over the winter landscape. "Not much to tell," Adam replied. "It was a small cattle ranch, nothing like this place, but it was good land with a creek running through it. My father worked it hard, taught me everything he knew about cattle and horses." "Do you miss it?" Adam was quiet for a moment. "I miss what it was. But after my parents died, it wasn't home anymore. I sold it to a neighbor before I went to war, and after the war, where did you go?" "Everywhere." "Nowhere," he smiled faintly. "I worked ranches in Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, did some scouting for the Army, broke horses, drove cattle. Never stayed anywhere long." "Why not?" He looked at her then, his eyes revealing more than his words. "Never found a reason to stay." The weight of his gaze made her heart beat faster. "And now?" she asked softly. Before he could answer, Rosie's voice called from the house. "Grace, Adam." "Daniel's back from town with news." They hurried inside to find Daniel removing his snow-covered coat. "Blackwell arrived early," he announced. "He's at the Grand Hotel now, and the reception is tomorrow evening." Grace felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. "Then we move forward with the plan." Daniel nodded. "I've arranged for several prominent citizens to be present, including Judge Harmon and Reverend Williams. If Blackwell tries anything, he'll have witnesses he can't easily dismiss." "You should rest today," Sarah advised Grace. "Tomorrow will be demanding," but rest proved elusive. As evening fell, Grace found herself pacing her room, her mind racing with all that could go wrong. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Adam entered, concern evident on his face. "You should be resting." "I can't," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I imagine facing Harrison tomorrow, and my heart feels like it might beat out of my chest." Adam crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "You don't have to do this, Grace. We can find another way." She shook her head. "This is the right path. Not just for me, but for my child. I'm just afraid." "That's natural," he said gently. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." She looked up at him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Will you stay with me, just until I fall asleep?" Adam hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." He sat in a chair by her bed as she lay down, his presence a comforting anchor in her sea of uncertainty. Just before sleep claimed her, she felt his hand gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered. "Both of you." Morning came too quickly. After breakfast, Sarah helped Grace dress in her best clothes, a deep blue dress that Sarah had altered to accommodate her condition, with a matching cape and bonnet. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her work. Grace touched her slightly rounded belly. "Do I look?" "Obviously with child. Only to those who know to look," Sarah assured her. "But it's visible enough that Harrison can't deny the evidence before him." By early afternoon, they were ready. Daniel would drive Grace, Adam, and Rosie into Fort Collins in his carriage. Sarah would remain at the ranch, preparing a celebration dinner for their return, her way of expressing confidence in their success. The ride into town was tense and mostly silent. Grace sat between Adam and Rosie, drawing strength from their presence. Adam's hand occasionally covered hers, a silent reassurance that she wasn't alone. Fort Collins was busy with the influx of visitors for the business council meeting. The Grand Hotel dominated the main street, its imposing facade a testament to the growing prosperity of the territory. Daniel pulled the carriage to a stop a block away. "The reception begins at 4 o'clock. I'll meet you at the hotel with Judge Harmon." Rosie adjusted her clothing. She had reluctantly traded her men's attire for a simple dress, though Grace knew she still carried a derringer in a hidden pocket. "Remember the plan," Adam said quietly as they walked toward the hotel. "We approach Harrison together. Grace speaks first. I'll introduce myself as a concerned family friend. And I'll be watching the room for any of Blackwell's men," Rosie added, "just in case." They entered the hotel lobby, which was already filling with well-dressed businessmen and their wives. Grace scanned the crowd, her heart hammering, until her eyes landed on a familiar figure. Harrison Blackwell stood near the center of the room, looking exactly as she remembered: tall, distinguished, with silver-streaked dark hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to power. He was speaking with several other men, laughing at something one of them had said. Grace froze, memories washing over her: his charming smile when they first met, his gentle courtship, the passionate declarations of love that had led her to trust him completely. And then the cold dismissal when she'd told him about the child, the cruel accusations that had destroyed her reputation and her life. Adam's hand at the small of her back steadied her. "We can still walk away," he murmured. She straightened her spine. "No, I need to do this." They moved through the crowd, Rosie separating from them to take a position along the wall. As they approached Harrison, Grace saw Daniel enter with Judge Harmon and Reverend Williams, positioning themselves nearby. Harrison's back was to them. When they were just a few feet away, Grace spoke, her voice clear despite her trembling hands. "Harrison," he turned, his expression changing from polite inquiry to shock as he recognized her. "Grace," he said, his voice barely audible, "what are you doing here?" "I've come to speak with you about our child," she said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Conversations around them faltered as people turned to watch. Harrison's face hardened, his eyes darting to those watching them. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said coldly. "This woman is delusional." "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Grace continued steadily. "I'm carrying your child, the child you denied when I told you in Riverdale, the child you've since sent men to silence." Harrison's face flushed with anger. "These are outrageous accusations." "Someone remove this woman." Adam stepped forward. "No one's removing anyone, Mr. Blackwell. Miss Norton deserves to be heard." "And who the hell are you?" Harrison demanded. "Adam Landon, a friend concerned for Miss Norton's welfare and that of her unborn child." Judge Harmon moved closer. "I believe we should hear the lady out, Harrison. These are serious allegations." Harrison's eyes narrowed as he realized he was being cornered. "This is absurd. I barely know this woman." "You courted me for months in Riverdale," Grace countered. "You attended my father's church every Sunday. You took meals at our home. You promised to marry me." "Lies, all of it," Harrison insisted, but Grace could see uncertainty in the eyes of those watching. "Why would I lie?" Grace asked, her voice breaking slightly. "You've taken everything from me, my home, my family, my reputation. I have nothing left to lose by speaking the truth." Harrison leaned closer, lowering his voice. "What do you want? Money? Is that it?" "I want you to acknowledge your child," Grace said firmly. "To provide support so that your son or daughter doesn't grow up in poverty. And I want you to call off your men." "I don't have men," Harrison scoffed. Rosie stepped forward then, her expression fierce. "Tell that to the clerk you sent to track her down, or the gunman who shot me when I interfered." A murmur ran through the growing crowd. Daniel moved to stand beside Grace, his solid presence adding weight to her position. "Harrison," Judge Harmon said gravely, "if there's truth to these accusations, it would be best to resolve this matter privately, rather than let it become public scandal." Harrison's eyes darted around the room, calculating. Finally, he plastered on a tight smile. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private." "No," Grace said firmly. "We've had private conversations before. This time I want witnesses." For a long moment, Harrison glared at her, rage simmering behind his composed exterior. Then, to Grace's surprise, his expression changed. The anger remained, but something else entered his eyes, a cold, calculating look that sent a chill down her spine. "Very well," he said smoothly. "If you insist on public declarations, let me make one of my own." He turned to face the crowd, which had grown considerably as word spread through the hotel. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. It appears I have a matter to address." He turned back to Grace, his eyes now filled with a strange light. "Miss Norton is correct that we were acquainted in Riverdale. What she fails to mention is that our relationship was brief and entirely proper." Grace opened her mouth to protest, but Harrison continued. "When she found herself in a delicate condition, she came to me for help. I offered what assistance I could, but I made it clear I could not be responsible for another man's indiscretion." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not true," she said, her voice shaking with outrage. "You know it's not true." Harrison shook his head sadly, his performance masterful. "I understand your desperation, my dear. A woman in your position, abandoned by the real father of your child, would naturally seek a more advantageous solution." Adam stepped forward, his face tight with anger. "That's enough, Blackwell." "And now she's found a champion," Harrison continued, ignoring Adam. "How convenient." The room had grown tense, the spectators uncertain who to believe. Grace felt her carefully laid plan crumbling around her. Harrison was too skilled at manipulation, too practiced at twisting the truth. Then Adam did something unexpected. He placed his arm around Grace's shoulders, drawing her protectively to his side. Mr. Blackwell, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room, I didn't come here as Miss Norton's champion. I came as a man who recognizes a grave injustice when he sees one. He looked down at Grace, something powerful passing between them before turning back to Harrison. But since you mention it, yes, Grace has found someone willing to stand by her, someone who sees her worth, her courage, and her honesty. His voice deepened with emotion. Someone who would be proud to call her child his own. Grace stared at him in shock. Adam's eyes held hers for a moment before he faced Harrison again. That baby is mine from this day forward, he declared. Whether you acknowledge your blood or not, I claim this child as my own to provide for, to protect, and to raise with the honor you so clearly lack. A stunned silence fell over the room. Harrison looked momentarily thrown by this unexpected turn. You would claim another man's child. He finally managed, disbelief evident in his voice. I would claim this child, Adam corrected, his hand gentle on Grace's shoulder. And I would consider myself fortunate to do so. Rosie was grinning now, and Daniel nodded approvingly. Judge Harmon stepped forward. It seems, Harrison, that the situation resolves itself, he said. If Mr. Landon is willing to take responsibility for Miss Norton and her child, the matter becomes a private one. Harrison's face darkened. This changes nothing. The woman accused me publicly of fathering her child. That's slander. Only if it's untrue, Reverend Williams spoke up for the first time. And given the lengths to which you've apparently gone to silence Miss Norton, one might question your innocence. The mood of the crowd was shifting, skeptical glances now directed at Harrison rather than Grace. Harrison sensed it too. His jaw tightened as he looked from Grace to Adam, then to the influential men now standing with them. Whatever calculation he was making, the equation no longer balanced in his favor. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Both of you. The only regret here is mine, Grace replied, finding her voice at last. That I ever believed in a man without honor. Harrison turned on his heel and pushed through the crowd. Several men followed him, business associates, unwilling to be seen abandoning him entirely, but clearly uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed. As the spectacle ended, the reception guests gradually returned to their conversations, though many cast curious glances at Grace and Adam. Well, Daniel said, breaking the tension, I believe Sarah is expecting us for dinner. Shall we? They made their way out of the hotel, Grace still dazed by what had just transpired. When they reached Daniel's carriage, she finally found her voice. Adam, she began, but he shook his head. Not here, he said gently. Let's get back to the ranch. The ride back was as quiet as the journey in, but for entirely different reasons. Grace sat beside Adam, acutely aware of his every movement, trying to process what his declaration meant. Had it been merely a tactical move to counter Harrison's manipulation? Or was there truth behind his words? The way he had looked at her, the conviction in his voice when he claimed her child as his own, it had felt genuine, deeply so. When they arrived at the ranch, Sarah was waiting anxiously on the porch. Well, she asked as they approached. What happened? Daniel smiled as he helped Rosie down from the carriage. It appears we have a betrothal to celebrate, if I'm not mistaken. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked from Grace to Adam. Let's go inside, Adam suggested. It's been a long day. Over dinner, they recounted the confrontation with Harrison. Sarah alternated between outrage at Blackwell's behavior and delight at Adam's response. So you simply declared the child yours? She asked Adam, eyes twinkling. Adam glanced at Grace. It seemed the right thing to do at the time. It was brilliant, Rosie declared. You should have seen Blackwell's face. After the meal, Daniel opened a bottle of brandy to celebrate their success, though Grace abstained due to her condition. As the evening wore on, Grace found herself growing increasingly anxious. Adam had barely spoken to her directly since they left Fort Collins, and she needed to understand what his actions meant. When Sarah suggested Grace might want to rest, she seized the opportunity. "Actually, I think I'll step outside for some fresh air first." Adam rose immediately. "I'll join you." The night was clear and cold, stars scattered like diamonds across the black velvet sky. They walked in silence toward a bench beneath a large oak tree, now bare of leaves for the winter. When they sat, Adam finally spoke. "I owe you an explanation." "You do," Grace agreed softly. He turned to face her, his features highlighted by the moonlight. "What I said today about the child being mine from this day forward, I meant every word. But I realize I spoke for both of us without asking you first. That wasn't fair." Grace studied his face. "Why did you do it?" "In that moment, I saw what Blackwell was doing, twisting the truth, making you seem desperate and dishonest. I couldn't let him win." Adam paused, his eyes intent on hers. "But it wasn't just strategy, Grace. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your courage, your kindness. I've come to care for you, deeply." Her heart quickened. "Even knowing my situation, especially knowing your situation." He took her hands in his. "You've faced adversity with a strength that amazes me. Your child will be extraordinary because they have you for a mother." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. "Adam, I don't know what to say. This is all happening so fast." "I know," he said gently. "And I'm not asking for an answer tonight. All I'm asking is that you consider allowing me to be part of your life and your child's life. Not out of obligation or protection, but because I believe we could build something good together." "And what about your wandering ways?" she asked. "You said yourself you've never stayed anywhere long." Adam smiled. "That was before I found a reason to stay." The tenderness in his voice undid her. Tears spilled onto her cheeks, and Adam reached up to wipe them away, his touch gentle against her skin. "Grace Norton, I'm falling in love with you," he said softly. "I didn't expect it, and the timing is far from ideal, but there it is. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Grace looked into his eyes, seeing the truth there. Against all odds, in the midst of chaos and danger, they had found each other. She thought about the path that had led her here, the pain, the rejection, the fear, and realized that without those trials, she might never have met this remarkable man. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "But Adam, are you sure? Taking on another man's child." "Not another man's child," he corrected firmly. "Our child. Mine from this day forward, just as I said, if you'll allow it." Grace felt something settle within her, a certainty, a rightness. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will." Adam's smile was brilliant in the moonlight. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Grace closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they returned to the house, hand in hand, their friends took one look at their faces and knew. Sarah embraced Grace warmly while Daniel clapped Adam on the shoulder. "About time you found a place to call home," Daniel told him. Rosie raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "And to family," Adam added, his eyes on Grace. In the weeks that followed, life took on a new rhythm. Adam and Grace were married by Reverend Williams in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Daniel, Sarah, and Rosie as their witnesses. Adam sent telegrams to contacts throughout the territory, making it known that Grace Norton was now Grace Landon, under his protection. Whether due to these precautions or the public nature of their confrontation, Harrison Blackwell made no further attempts to interfere in their lives. They heard through Daniel that he had left Fort Collins abruptly after the business council meeting, returning to Denver with his reputation slightly tarnished. Rosie stayed at the ranch for a time, her wounded arm healing slowly. When spring arrived, she announced plans to move on. "The Silver Star Mining Company has offered me a position as head of security at their new operation in Montana," she told them over dinner one evening. "Seems our confrontation with Blackwell made some waves. They like the idea of having someone who's not afraid to stand up to the big mining interests." "We'll miss you," Grace said, genuinely sad to see her friend leave. Rosie smiled. "I'll visit. Someone needs to teach this little one how to shoot straight." She patted Grace's now prominent belly. Adam had purchased land adjacent to Daniel's ranch, and construction on their own home was nearly complete. It was a modest place compared to Daniel's sprawling ranch house, but to Grace, it represented everything she had once thought lost: security, belonging, family. On a warm May evening, Adam found Grace sitting on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, lowering himself beside her. She smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her belly where their child kicked vigorously. "I was thinking about journeys, how the path that seems most painful can sometimes lead you exactly where you need to be." Adam nodded, his thumb gently caressing her hand. "When I rode into Silver Creek that day, I had no idea my life was about to change completely. Do you ever regret it, taking on so much responsibility all at once?" His answer was immediate. "Not for a single moment." He leaned over to kiss her softly. "You and this child are the greatest gifts I've ever received." Grace rested her head on his shoulder, contentment washing over her. From being banished and alone, she had found her way to this moment loved, protected, and part of a family of her own making. 2 weeks later, their daughter was born, a healthy, strong, lunged girl with a tuft of dark hair and her mother's determined chin. As Adam held her for the first time, his face filled with wonder and love, Grace knew with absolute certainty that this child would never doubt her place in the world. They named her Hope, for all that they had found in each other and all that lay ahead. "Hello, Hope Landon," Adam whispered to his daughter, tears glistening in his eyes. "I'm your father, and I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." Grace watched them, her heart full. In this man's arms, her daughter would know only acceptance and love, never judgment or shame. The past, with all its pain, had led to this perfect moment. As summer bloomed across the Colorado foothills, word came that Harrison Blackwell had left the territory, his business interests sold to competitors. The shadow that had hung over Grace for so long finally lifted completely. Rosie visited that autumn, bringing gifts for Hope and stories of her adventures in Montana. She stayed for a week, teaching Adam new shooting techniques and helping Grace preserve the bounty from their first garden. "You've built something beautiful here," she told them the night before her departure. "Something that will last." Grace, watching Adam rock their daughter to sleep by the firelight, couldn't have agreed more. From the darkest moment of her life had come this unexpected blessing: a home filled with love, a husband who cherished her, and a daughter who would grow up surrounded by acceptance rather than judgment. "Yes," she said softly, "something that will last." Years passed, the rhythm of ranch life shaping their days. Hope grew into a spirited, curious child with her father's quiet confidence and her mother's compassionate heart. When she was 3, a brother joined the family, Samuel, named for Adam's father. Occasionally, travelers passing through would bring news of Harrison Blackwell. He had remarried, moved to San Francisco, lost a fortune in mining investments, regained it in railroad speculation. His life continued far away, his brief connection to theirs fading with time. On Hope's 5th birthday, a package arrived at the ranch, a doll with porcelain features and silk clothing, far finer than anything available locally. There was no note, no indication of the sender, but Grace knew. She considered sending it back, but instead tucked it away in the trunk that held Hope's baby clothes and other mementos. "One day," she told Adam that night, "when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her the whole story. About how I was banished, how you claimed her as your own, and how we built this life together." Adam nodded, pulling her close. "And she'll know that family is about love, not blood, that it's about who stays, not who leaves. She'll know she has the best father a child could ask for," Grace said, resting her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart, the heart that had been brave enough to claim another man's child and love it as his own. Outside their window, the Colorado stars shone bright and clear, witnesses to a love that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances, but had grown strong and true with each passing season. Grace Norton Landon, once banished and alone, had found her place in the world not in spite of her trials, but because of them. And in the room down the hall, Hope Landon slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was loved beyond measure by a mother who had risked everything to bring her into the world, and by a father who had chosen her, claimed her, and would protect her always. The simple words he had spoken that day in Fort Collins had changed everything. "That baby is mine from this day forward." And so it was, and would always be.